SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And this, of course, is where we are stationed this morning, where we were yesterday as well. But this time on a Sunday morning, we're here. It doesn't feel like a Sunday morning, I can tell you that one. There's nothing slow about the start to this morning. There's a lot of people that are here at the Nasrec precinct. That, of course, is where the final day of the Leaders G20 Summit is going to be hosted. There's closed sessions that'll be taking place. In fact, one closed session, but massive conversations that are going to be held. This after the leaders' declaration was announced and agreed to right at the beginning of yesterday's start.
Indeed, Leanne, and as we've been saying, given that there is opportunity for the leaders also to engage with one another, quite a few bilateral discussions happening, and we've just been informed that President Cyril Ramaphosa will have a bilateral meeting with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who last night had an event as well, and then the President will be hosting India, Brazil and South Africa, the IPSA Summit, also at around 9 this morning. So that's coming up. And this, of course, against the backdrop of an adoption of the declaration here at the Leaders Summit. We're joined by Dr. Oscar van Heerden just to talk to some of what we have been observing here. Dr. van Heerden, of course, Senior Research Fellow for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg. Thanks so much for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome to have you here. So as Sakina's saying, I mean, there's going to be those bilaterals with India, South Africa and many other countries. But you were mentioning, as we heard this news, that there were some interesting commitments by India last night during a press briefing that they had, or a meeting they had. Talk to us about what came out of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, what came out last night was clearly an India that says we are in partnership with South Africa. We want to take things further in terms of development, and realizing, they mentioned, for example, that they realized that we are a young population. Africa has a young population, and so one of the things amongst many is that they want to really put in some money into education, into the schooling system, making sure that we begin to skills, and talking about that education guided towards digitization, AI, technology, which is really nice. Knowing that India themselves have over the last 10, 15 years just exploded in terms of software engineers and behind the scenes, really going for the new technology.
But the future of all of that is obviously intertwined with Africa. There is no AI revolution development in any sort of way without Africa because of the critical minerals. And as we know, those come from this continent. So let's talk about that, because this whole discussion around beneficiation has been going on, but it is now at a point where I think Africa no longer wants to talk, but actually wants to move over to action.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's about Africa no longer wants to just be a market. For too long, the rest of the world saw it as a market. Let's dump our technology, let's dump our goods there, and they pay. And I think the argument from the presidency of the G20, when they say if we have 30%, that's a huge market share of any industry. If you have 30%, surely we need to make sure that that turns into a positive benefit for us. And that's why they're talking beneficiation, saying it's not about just extracting and taking it away. The days of taking the platinum, putting it into the catalytic converter, the days of taking the cobalt and putting it into phones and technologies is over. We as Africa, and this is really the key, Sakina, for me and Leanne, is that if the leaders of Africa are not going to be one, if they don't come together and agree, because for too long what we have seen is the West being able, the traditional West, being able to divide and rule. They meet on the side. We saw it yet again now with President Trump. He selected a very few 6 African nations, come and meet with me quietly, let's make a few deals at the expense of the rest of the continent. And I think with the AU now being part of the G20 and with the Africa Free Trade Agreement in place, I think that African leaders need to now begin to think like leaders and think strategically. Otherwise, the future of the continent is not going to be so bright.
And that's the reality, because at the end of the day, I mean, this has been something that we've been seeing with every single mineral that's ever been mined here on this continent, and it's nothing new that we are so rich in these minerals, but now it's a part of this revolution that's taking place as well. The declaration pretty much so emphasizing, and this is what it states, value addition inside producing countries.
Yeah.
So that's what they're wanting to do. But this takes a lot of hard work, and as you say, buy-in and commitment from the African leaders on this one. But what are the actual real structural changes that need to happen? Because Monday, when the eyes are off this, the document is out there, that's all great, but the work has to begin and the commitments need to begin. How do we ensure we benefit from this? And once again, this is not just talk and rhetoric.
You know, it's a cliche, unfortunately, but we're not going to get anywhere if the guns are not silenced. You know, the hotspots and the wars need to stop. We need to take that out of the equation. People like Kagame, I know there's many that admire him, but what he's doing in the Eastern DRC needs to come to an end. We need to stop that. We need to get into grips with what's happening in Sudan. And then, once we now have that silence, we can begin to talk and pull it together. And I think there's a big role to play for South Africa. I think one of the things that we've seen over the last few days, in fact, for the whole year, in managing this G20, is really the kind of leadership that South Africa can provide on behalf of the continent. And I think there's an acknowledgement from the rest of the continent that they are proud that we've managed to pull this off, that we've managed to host the first G20 on the African continent. And I think that Ramaphosa, it will be silly if they are not going to take this further with regards to the African Union and saying, let's now see how we turn this into tangible plans going forward.
But of course, we are going to need, to your point, Leanne, new frameworks around sustainable financing models for all of this, because there has to be investments. And if you look at, for example, something like a smelter,
yes,
you know, that you will need for that beneficiation process, we've been closing down smelters. So we need the energy, we need the investment, we need finance institutions to come to the party, but we also need business to have the will to invest. And are we at that point?
You know, it's interesting because one of our leading businessmen, A.D. Eindhoven, you know, the Hollard family, he wrote a paper recently for the Business Unity South Africa, and talking about we are turning the corner. And he mentions the stats. You know, I know people want to see the facts. And he mentions that and how we're turning the corner with logistics and rail, because the private sector is now involved. Our ports are shaping up. It used to take 21 days to get containers out. It's now back to the international norm of 3-4 days and so on. The kind of investments that's actually now realizing. We got the 12 billion euros from the European Union for the just transition. We got the 10 billion from China for our technology development. So we are beginning to see money coming in. And of course, from our side, domestically, Treasury, small surplus in the budget, very small, but a surplus nonetheless.
Surplus nonetheless.
You know, and also the last quarter, there was about 140,000 new jobs created. So things are looking on the up. I think Cyril is going to sleep with a smile after tomorrow with this successful G20 as well.
Just to the point of, you know, climate change. And we know, and this is one of the questions, of course, going forward. With Donald Trump being a known climate skeptic, we know under his previous presidency, he actually withdrew the United States from the Paris Agreement. So, knowing his stance on, you know, climate change and the consensus around it that he disagrees with, how is this going to be taken up moving forward as the United States assumes the presidency?
Also COP30, just to add to that. I mean, that's just ended as well. And there was no agreement in terms of cutting fossil fuels. And these are big problems. So it's almost contrasting views.
Look, it's the largest economy in the world. It's the number one economy in the world. It cannot be ignored. But I think the world here, this weekend, the world is now beginning to speak with one voice and saying, we can't, unfortunately, be guided by someone who still says climate change is a hoax.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you know, Trump bluffed with this G20. Ramaphosa called his bluff. He thought that the G7 allies were going to step with him in boycotting. They didn't. Why? Because exactly of the sentiments the two of you are sharing. People realize you have to work with Africa. You can't ignore Africa. You can't allow conservative racist views to inform business going forward. We heard what the Chancellor of Germany said. Very important, he says we are here to stay. And I think he knows exactly who he's talking to.
Yeah.
You know, the sentence that got me yesterday with the opening remarks of Ramaphosa was, and again I think he spoke to the Americans, he says multilateralism can and does work.
As proven here.
If you want to solve the problems of the world, we have to come together. You cannot do it. The days of unilateralism and one person thinking he can solve the problems of the world is over. And this is the same with climate change.
It's very much so. It'll be interesting to see, because I don't know, we were chatting off air, but I don't know if we've heard a response from the US as yet, because there was as much as they weren't here, they were being spoken about. So what is the old cliche? If you're not in the room at the dinner table, you're on the menu. It felt like the US was on the menu at one stage here. So any response whatsoever from them?
Nothing.
Nothing as yet?
Nothing.
We wait.
I think
there
they're
will
trying
be one.
to, of course,
Oh,
I
there'll
think
be
they're
a
going
big
to
one.
digest. I mean, we
the
can
nothing
anticipate.
in itself is a response.
Yeah.
So
No, I think we can anticipate. He's going to throw his toys out of the cot. He's going to say, I don't agree with this declaration. And he's probably going to say, we're not inviting South Africa next year, and
Okay.
so on. And I don't know if you saw how cleverly the last paragraph of the declaration was constructed.
Yeah.
We thank South Africa for its leadership, and we are getting ready to go to the next UK and then South Korea. It's like saying, we know we're not going to be there next year.
But just, we're out of time, we have to go. But as you say, they might not invite South Africa. Do we need an invitation? Seeing that we are
Absolutely
part of the Troika.
part of it.
We don't need the invitation. But so we're going to park it there. Dr. Oscar van Heerden, and that's where we leave it here at Nasrec for now. We'll be coming back later, but let's hand you back to the Auckland Park studio.
SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.